So my sister, she was mocking what I do for a living, saying, "Oh, the business is beneath her." Until, well, I find out a secret about her rich husband, which led her to my door, begging me. While sitting on my porch yesterday, sipping a warm cup of coffee from my mug that read "Girl Boss," and looking into my garden of flowers, I remember how my sister came to me begging just a few months back. Not like this is something to be proud of or happy about, and I'm certainly not happy at her downfall, but one can say Janice deserved it. Janice had always been vile towards me since we were younger. We had pretty, petty arguments, like every other sister, but she always found a way to make me cry afterward. Janice, I would say, is the pretty pie in our home. We're a family of 4, me, Janice, mother, father. But my father, he passed away when I was 8 and she was 4, and it's safe to say everyone considered me responsible for his death, because I told him not to go out that morning because it was bad, and the only reason I didn't want him to go out was because the day was my ballet recital, and he was going to miss it, but instead, he had a tragic accident on his way to work and passed away a few days later. The whole family felt I jinxed and killed him, because I was angry. I wasn't allowed near his casket at his burial and was dressed in a separate color from what had been picked out. Not a single person bothered to give me a hug or a kiss, and I guess my feelings didn't really matter. This marked the start of my torture. For the next 30 years, I would be an outcast in my family. My mom loved Janice more than she does me, and she never ceased to hide it. She got the best clothes, the best shoes, random gifts, while I had to manage scraps and hand-me-downs. She was always tidied and had such a nice set of fresh pencils and books, while I looked shabby and borrowed practically everything. I was clumsy, slow, and dull. Janice was an average student and what we called a B student, right from elementary school. I, however, struggled to manage and get through each class. I would fail so much that I had to make up for my grades in summer camp. This is where I took a liking for cooking, but my mom saw me as a waste and would make these references to how I wasn't going to be a doctor like Janice. On 2 different occasions, I registered for the junior chef championship in my district, but she locked me in and said I was a glutton who would disgrace the family by failing. This broke me and made my mental health issues even worse. I would go to the cemetery alone after school and cry at my father's grave, questioning why I had to suffer this much for something I had no hand in. This meant I got home late, but nobody actually cared as long as the princess was home. My high school was tough, not because of the grades, but because Janice has gotten even more beautiful. And there was me, that ugly duckling that ruined family pictures. My hair was long, but always looked unkempt, while she had a short little trim going, which she did every month. I never got any allowance or trips to the mall. I spent a huge chunk of my time sleeping or reading cookbooks, ones that I would find in the local library. I kept a diary where I wrote down my feelings every day, and I had lots of diaries since. Life wasn't easy in high school either. I was always ignored and prone to pranks, some of which were very cruel. I remember when I was 16, and Janice's crush Tyler had, abused me in a private room at his house party, and I was so excited to have gotten invited to one of those parties meant for, all the cool people. He pretended just to be nice, and then he went ahead and switched up on me, drugging and proceeding to abuse me inside of his room. Janice had liked Tyler a lot and walked in on him, quote, finishing. She left for home angry and left me at the party full of predators that same night. Mitch, another guy at the party, pretended to help me, but he went ahead to abuse me again in the bathroom while I was washing up. I felt so dirty and ran home in my bloodied shorts. Getting home, Mom and Janice were in the kitchen sitting in a dramatic pose. Mom stormed in my direction, turned me around, and stared at my shorts with disgust. She insulted me and said I was, worn out. And who goes about just sleeping with teenage boys in school rather than learning? I looked at my sister's eyes, seeking validation, begging with every teardrop for her validation. I wanted her to tell Mom the truth, that I was abused, but guys, she didn't. She looked me dead in the eyes and smirked, and this was her revenge for me being quick. I bawled my eyes out that night under the shower, and flashbacks from that night kept playing in my head, and I showered and took myself to Planned Parenthood, where I got the pills to lessen the pain. They asked if I've been abused, but I denied vehemently. I was scared case would spring up and I'll become the absolute talk of the school. It was on this day I affirmed that my sister must have absolutely hated me. Well, 5 years went by swiftly, and the relationship between my mom's sister and I continued to be strained. I had to tolerate a lot because I was saving up to get admitted to culinary school, and I only had a job at a local canteen. The wage was minimum and not enough to make me through school and bills simultaneously. They still didn't hesitate to show me how much I was hated. Another example is the previous year that they planned a remembrance for my father, and I only found out through Facebook. I ran all the way to the cemetery and just burst into tears. Everyone looked at me, their faces pale with disdain, and Aunt even screamed, "The ill luck is here!" So, I questioned my mother, asking her why she hadn't told me anything, and she started to scream, "Why do you need to know?" And an argument broke out between the both of us, and that was the state of our relationship, and it got worse day by day. She would insult me, shame me, fat shame me every single day. It did not help that I was unable to keep a lasting relationship, mainly because of family issues and mental health. Janice, however, got into college and studied business administration, where she met Roger, her tall, handsome, quirky husband. See, he belonged to a rather wealthy family, you could say, and was also very intelligent. He had just finished school and was hoping to start his business chain, which did, got successful real fast. They had a destination wedding, which I begged my sister to let me co-cater for her, but she refused because she didn't want a botched job at her upper-class wedding. I was also made to dress like a servant, but it was there I met Troy, who turned out to be heaven-sent. That night, guys, I went ahead to make myself a promise. I promised myself not to attend family events anyways. It was evident I wasn't wanted. I picked up myself, dusted off the regrets, and started culinary school. I luckily enough had enough finances for my journey at the culinary school of choice, and further, Troy, a friend from my sister's wedding, kept in touch with me all through my ordeal. I opened up a lot to him, and he suggested psychotherapy, because I had internalized trauma, and he registered me as a therapist too, and I didn't want to first do it, but he compelled me to. I also started exercising and looking after my appearance. Troy described me as a flower in its bloom, and I was emerging and would be excellent like, me. We were really close, and he agreed to be my food taster on days when I wanted to practice a new recipe. He was over at our home very frequently, and my mom had started suspecting a relationship, which was not the case. She would tease him about how he was settling for far less by being in a relationship with little old me, and talk about how she had the perfect daughter for him, but she was married but had single cousins. I would cry myself to sleep that night, knowing how much my mother hated me. Troy called to check up on me and give me reassurance that I was beautiful. I was perfect. He also asked me out on a date to a water park. He knows I've never enjoyed all this when I was a child, and I guess he was determined to help me feel better. There, we had so much fun going up the slides and rides, and I was grinning from ear to ear, and my inner child was getting vindicated and healed. Later that night, he asked me to be his girlfriend and planted a gentle kiss on my trembling lips. I was so excited that I squealed and ran, making him come after me and catch me. I had butterflies in my belly, and they multiplied when he gave me a promise ring. Little did I know that there was trouble brewing at home. See, my mother gained access to my room because I forgot to lock it up, and oh boy, she got into my diary. She saw how I described my dislike for her and Janice in detail. I unsuspected stepped into the living area trying to sneak up, but caught the eye of my mother. She had a very beastly look on her face, and Janice was there standing by her as usual. They both looked like they could devour me like wild animals, and as I tried to make my way up, she cleared her throat and pointed at the table. Bringing my gaze down, I was startled to see my diaries laid out on the kitchen table. My mom stormed over and slapped me. She called me vile, heartless, ungrateful, wicked, you name it. That night, before throwing me out, she said to me, "You're lucky. I even let you stay after you killed your father. I should have thrown you out earlier, you worthless brat." These words stayed etched in my memory to this day. I needed a place to stay, but I rarely had close friends I could go to. I had only Troy, and I didn't want to go to his apartment as it felt wrong. But when he called later that night, I burst into tears and told him everything. He drove over faster than the speed of lightning and picked me up. We got to his apartment, and I was blown away. He worked in interior design, but didn't have to go this hard on his place. Jeez, it felt like a place from the movies. And he could see how surprised I was. He told me I could stay in the spare room if that helped me feel better, and I could find a place to stay afterwards. He made me dinner that night, and I felt good. The next day, I tried getting in touch with my relatives who could apologize to my mother, but they all didn't care that I wasn't at home. They never took my calls, and once again, I was the outcast of my family. Update number 1, Culinary School and Confrontations. Well, it's been almost a year after my mom threw me out. I was graduating from culinary school as a top chef, and I started my YouTube channel teaching young people how to make nutritious meals. Troy was going to be the only one at the ceremony, but I wanted my family to be there as well. I tried severely to get in touch with my mom to no avail. She also did not answer the door any time I went home, and there was only one thing left to do. Get in touch with Janice's husband, and I was able to reach him through the email on his LinkedIn page. Luckily, I got a swift response from him, and he told me, "My mom and his sister were on vacation but would be back in 2 days." I went to the gift shop and curated an apology box for both of them. I was going to go to any length to ensure they attend my ceremony. I hadn't healed from the trauma, but still yearned for my family. I reached out to them through Facebook, but they did not respond to my messages. I was able to track down their airport arrival with Roger's help. If looks could kill, I would be dead and buried by now because my sister shot me a very nasty look the instant I came out of the car, beside her husband. I swiftly knelt down and held my ears with the puppy eye combination. They were too embarrassed to say no as we were in public, and we went back to the family house, but Janice did not go with us. It was just Mother and I. The silence that lingered in the air of the house was so deafening you could hear a pin drop. She finally broke the silence with words I never knew I could hear from her. She held my hand, raised my chin, and looked me dead in the eyes. "I'm sorry, Clarice, for everything I did to you while you were growing up. I did some introspection after reading your diaries and realized I was a terrible mother. I didn't stand up to you after you were abused," and at that point she burst into tears and I started to cry as well. "I should have stood by you, protected you, but I did the opposite. I pushed you away into the claws of evil. You suffered, my child, and I'm to blame for it. You never killed your father. No, you didn't. You're beautiful, talented, intelligent, and I love you." My inner child healed up that day. My mother loves me. She just told me that, but I couldn't believe it. I questioned why she didn't come after me soon, but she said Janice didn't want her to, and she didn't want to upset her. We spoke lengthily that day, covering many topics about my childhood, her life, and after her dad died, and how she coped with the loneliness. She told me she treated Janice especially better because she was the closest representation to my father. Well, his absolute carbon copy. This explains the unshaken love for her. We closed things that night with hugs, and she affirmed that she would attend my graduation and even tried to bring Janice along. I slept well that night. I didn't get nightmares and was cuddled in the arms of my love, Troy. What more could I ask for? My mom hosted a get-together for us all, and almost all the family members were in attendance. I was so scared that I would have a meltdown again or be pushed aside as usual. But it was different this time. My mom addressed every issue and made everyone apologize to me. We danced, we had fun, and I cooked for everyone, and they all enjoyed it except for Janice. She walked out amidst chatter and was upset the attention was not on her. I tried to go after her, but she sped off in her classic red Cadillac. The day came for my graduation, and yes, the morning was cold, the breeze was fine. I was happy. I dressed up in my gown, and Troy drove me down to the school. The hall was filled to the brim with happy faces and families. I walked into it, stretching my neck, searching like an ostrich for my family, and there I saw my mom dressed in her favorite color, pink. She gave me a deep hug and congratulated me, and Mom said to me, "Clarice, I'm proud of you." Well, I tried to hug Janice, but she stretched out her hands for a shake instead, and as usual, she tried to make this about her instead, and kept lying that she's supporting my dreams and is my #1 support system. After telling all these barefaced lies, she still did not come over to say congratulations. Update number 2. Starting my restaurant. I got a job as a culinary teacher immediately after school, and I resumed, but my heart was always elsewhere. I'd always wanted to open up a restaurant in honor of my father's recipe. I needed to gather enough funds for that, and my mom had asked me to approach my sister for some funds, but I knew damn well she was not going to help me, so I didn't even attempt it. I also stopped my mom from going for her help so she doesn't get embarrassed on my behalf. I worked for about a year at the school, and when Mom, Troy, and some friends called up the money to buy me a food truck, I'd never been more delighted. It came as a birthday gift, and I thanked them so much for it, and I resigned from my job at the school and started operations at the food truck. The kitchen was a street food and cuisine mixed, and our menu was infused with urban culture. My father's recipes and some cuisine dishes. It soon became the talk of the town, and I had lots of customers to attend to. It was a dream come true that further flourished when I got a little walk-in space that could cater to at least 20 people at a stretch. It wasn't a luxurious one yet, but the money was coming. Accounts were balanced, and the debt I incurred was cleared. My mom's birthday party soon came up, and she decided to host a dinner with Troy, Roger, Janice, and me, just to catch up. Janice's kids were also coming along, and I was doing the cooking. It was mainly a potluck because everyone had to bring in their set of meals. The dinner, tables set, but a bite cloth draped from the brown mahogany table. Wine glasses skated side by side, cutlery and plates. A separate table which we had used as children was decorated for Janice's kids, and the room was lit with bright lights. I wore a knitted dress and some wedge slippers. My hair was in a long flow, and I had, light makeup on and pale brown jewelry. Troy arrived first, and he instantly planted a kiss on my lips, not minding my mother's presence, and he even whispered, "Oh, you look beautiful, I love you." This was going to be the only exciting moment that night. Janice and Roger arrived in a Porsche. Their presence was immediately felt as they smelt like wealth. Roger strode and first dressed in a neat black suit and wide smile upon his face, and black shaded shoes on his feet. He walked over to Mother and gave her a very big hug and a birthday present. Janice walked in next, struggling with the food of her kids. She also had a black dress on, but stress was written all over her face. I thought it was odd that he had let his wife, to struggle with the 2 kids, but didn't think much of it. I brushed the thought off and began setting up the table. We were having mac and cheese, grilled steak, lamb chops, fried catfish, and of course ackee, and some chaser sandwiches and salads. I topped it off with my famous mango citrus juice and punch. The kids were very rowdy, but I managed to calm them down and gave them apple juice instead of some, what we were drinking, and rice and pork. We began eating and talked about work, life, business, and Roger sure had a lot to say about his business trips around the world and his experience there. Janice also spoke about her numerous travels to Malibu, Dubai, Maldives, Kenya, so on. They tried so hard to speak in unison, but I could see that there was a huge rift between them, and they were cosplaying their happiness. Troy, however, managed to break into the conversation by talking about his time doing mission work in Haiti, his fashion business, therapy, and meeting/falling in love with me. He spoke about how I inspired a lot of his design, and I didn't even know this earlier at this point. Janice stood up to use the bathroom, and I followed her into a bid to make small talk. I could swear she was crying or cleaning off her tears, but the moment I knocked on the door, it all went silent. She stepped out and scolded me for stalking her, calling me fake, and saying I was also trying to be the center of attention. This hurt me a lot, but I understood the need for the outburst, and I told her she could confide in me if anything was wrong, but she shoved me aside and walked off. I stepped into the bathroom to let out some tears. Tidied up and moved on. I wasn't going to let this pull me down. As I stepped back into the dining, all eyes moved to me, and it was obvious that they had all heard our argument. My mom, she starts talking about how she was so grateful for God's blessing on my life and how proud she was. It's safe to say it did not go down well with Janice, and she starts hissing under her breath. Well, when Roger asked me about the restaurant, she cut in saying, "Her restaurant's no big deal. Why do you need to know? It's just a small cottage kitchen that serves food to paupers and homeless people. It's probably rat-infested and below standards like the owner." I was broken by what she had said, and I could not even defend myself. I ran up to my old room, and Troy was running behind me, trying to catch me. I locked myself in and cried a lot. I'd done absolutely nothing to deserve the hatred. On this day, I made a vow to ensure I become a certified restaurant owner. Update number 3. 2 years later. It was a cool winter night. I just finished up for the day at the restaurant, and we were no longer taking orders. I had just made a seafood boil for one of my best clients and served it up. I looked at my Michelin certification on the wall of the kitchen and I smiled. I think it's luxurious and above standard now, eh? The light bounces off my diamond ring and into a pot, and this gives me flashbacks from the wedding a year ago. The same wedding my sister had not invited because she was upset at me. I'd sent out the invitations twice, but she chose to travel to Alaska instead. I stared at my baby bump, and I looked like I was due in 2 weeks and just 4 months. I stepped out the front door to get a cab, but Troy had decided to surprise me instead, and he was going to drop me off at my mom's place before he traveled to Milan for Fashion Week. The drive to Mom's house was slow. The snow was heavy and filled up the streets, which meant we had to drive extra carefully to avoid an accident. I opened the door and was shocked to see Janice. She looked very stressed and tired, and her kids weren't with her either. She dropped the cup in her hands, breaking it, and tears after tears followed, but I stood stiff. It felt like a dream, or was she really excited to see me? She began to apologize for everything that she's done and the pain that she caused me, and I wasn't fazed. I'd gotten over everything and started life new and fresh, and I reassured her that she was forgiven already and there's no grudges between us. But I was shocked to later found out why she was here. So, Troy drives off gently after giving my bags to me, and I was already so hungry, so I just got into the kitchen and tried to fix something up. I was walking on eggshells around Janice as I didn't want to upset her. My mom was out with her sorority group on a chocolate date, and I went up to my room and fell asleep immediately. I was woken up, though, by my mom's radio loud voice, a voice so thick it would sell if used for commercials. She seemed to be having an argument with someone. I decided to check who it was. I was shocked to find her having an argument with Janice about her marriage. She held some papers in her hands and slumped on her chair before throwing them across the room. The papers landed directly in front of it, and divorce between Mr. Roger and Miss Janice Crawford. My hands trembled and the papers finally fell out of my hands. I couldn't believe what I've just read. I picked it back up and read the terms of service. It was based on infidelity. Janice is a cheater? We all sat down in a semicircle and my mom was brooding, I with my head in my palm and Janice crying. Well, she was not only going to get divorced, she would lose custody of her kids as well. Roger, despite having such a cool look, was so despicable. He planned for this for years and was a step ahead of her at all times. The destination wedding was a decoy to get her to marry him in a state with relaxed spousal laws, which means he would not pay spousal support in the case they divorce. He also never looked her, but married her. He didn't love her, because she looked like his late girlfriend. He told her not to work and promised to open a trust fund for her, and he was going to be making enough to fend for the family. A few years down the line, he starts mistreating her and basically ignoring her, but would compensate with trips and vacations. And they had agreements that included not working, having 4 kids, and, well, the trust, but it wasn't written on the paper, which is her biggest mistake in the whole debauchery. The reason for the divorce was, quote, infidelity, so we queried her about that, and she said her body had gone through numerous changes since childbirth, and their sex life died. He was no longer attracted to her and her soft body. She spent half of her time at the gym, but that wasn't enough for him. He was basically disgusted that their children had passed through her body, and she irked him. She said in a few months earlier that he had asked to open up the marriage verbally with no signed agreement, and she agreed. She had made out with her gym instructor, and he gets upset about it then and filed a divorce. He claimed she did not consult him before going on with it, and he had power and connections. So, it was basically his word against hers. This new perspective forever changed how I viewed him, and now he disgusts me. Janice was distraught and tired, and, well, I felt so bad for her. Update number 4. Final update, moving on. These past weeks have been adventurous for me. I just delivered my twin babies, a boy and a girl, and they look just like Troy and I. Life has indeed been beautiful and kind towards me. I'm sitting in my garden thinking about a few months earlier. My sister had come to me sad, tired, and distraught. Divorce paper was beginning to take a toll on her, and she became very ill. She might have been the worst sister in the world, but I still had to help her. I gave her a job as a tech assistant at my work. She wasn't really up to date with trends in the field, as she's never worked a day since graduating, so I had somebody train her till she got the hang of it. I was really skeptical about employing her, as she might decide to cause trouble. I'd struggled to build my business and brand, and I was not about to let it get ruined. I confided in my mom about my worries, and she suggested I make her sign an undertaking that states that she would be at utmost loyalty to the company and be punished surely if found lacking. I was surprised when she signed it, but relieved. She didn't take it wrongly, and Troy also signed a major deal from his show in Milan and got paid a ton of money for some fabric designs. We put the money together and bought a property in a highbrow community where we would raise our children. The week is stressful for me, and this might be the only time I'm able to sip my coffee, which I should not be taking anyways, and relax, but I'm so excited. I'm married to the best man in the world. I just had twin babies, and my restaurant was given 2 Michelin certificates, which makes us one of the best in the city. I could not have been happier. So, don't you love how this story starts with OP sipping a cup of coffee on a nice day? And the end of the story, OP was sipping a cup of coffee on a nice day. This story, it started out slow, but then it just kept progressing and got even crazier. But at the end of the day, it looks like OP came out on top. And her husband when he got that big job in Milan. I want to know your thoughts about today's video because this one was a little different from our usual family drama. But at the end of the day, it still had action-packed drama. Let me know your thoughts once again. My name's Mr. Reddito, and I narrate these stories every day. So if you want to be a part of these drama readings, just hit the subscribe button. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. And remember one thing, it's cool to be kind. Peace.